Address to the Assembly of Jamaica, delivered in General Congress in Philadelphia, July 25th, 1775. Mr. Speaker and gentlemen of the Assembly of Jamaica, we would think ourselves deficient in our duty if we suffered this Congress to pass over without expressing our esteem for the Assembly of Jamaica. Whoever attends to the conduct of those who have been entrusted with the administration of the British affairs during the last 12 years will discover in it a deliberate plan to destroy in every part of the empire the free constitution for which Britain has been so long and so justly famed. With a dexterity artful and wicked, they have varied the modes of attack according to the different characters and circumstances of those whom they meant to reduce. In the East Indies, where the effeminates of the inhabitants in the East Indies, where the effeminacy of the inhabitants promised an easy conquest, they thought it unnecessary to veil their tyrannic principles under the thinnest disguise. Without deigning even to pretend a justification of their conduct, they sacrificed the lives of millions to the gratification of their insatiable avarice and lust of power. In Britain, where the maxims of freedom were still known, but where luxury and dissipation had diminished the want revered for them, the attack has been carried on in a more secret and indirect manner. Corruption has been employed to undermine them. The Americans are not enervated by effeminacy like the inhabitants of India, nor debauched by luxury like those of Great Britain. It was, therefore, judged improper to assail them by bribery or by undisguised force. Plausible systems were formed, spacious pretenses were made, all the arts of sophistry were tied to shew that the British ministry had by law a right to enslave us. The first and best maxims of the Constitution, venerable to Britons and to Americans, were perverted and profaned. The power of Parliament, derived from the people to bind the people, was extended over those from whom it was never derived. It is asserted that a standing army may be constitutionally kept among us without our consent. Those principles dishonorable to those who adopted them, and destructive to those to whom they were applied, were nevertheless carried into execution by the foes of liberty and of mankind. Acts of Parliament ruinous to America and unserviceable to Britain were made to bind us. Armies maintained by Parliament were sent over to secure their operation. The power, however, and the cunning of our adversaries were alike let's read that again. The power, however, and the cunning of our adversaries were alike unsuccessful. We refused to their parliaments an obedience which our judgment disapproved of. We refused to their armies a submission which spirits unaccustomed to slavery could not brook. But while we spurned a disgraceful subjugation, we were far from running into rash and seditious measures of opposition. But while we spurned a disgraceful subjugation, we were far from running into a rash or seditious measure of opposition, filled with sentiments of loyalty to our sovereign and of affection and respect for our fellow subjects in Britain, we petitioned and supplicated, we expostulated. Our prayers were rejected, our remonstrances were disregarded, our grievances were accumulated. All this did not provoke us to violence. An appeal to justice and humanity of those who had injured us and who were bound to redress our injuries was ineffectual. We next resolved to make an appeal to their interests, though by doing so we knew we must sacrifice our own, and, which gives us equal uneasiness, that of our friends who had never offended us and who were connected with us by a sympathy of feelings under oppression similar to our own. We resolved to give up our commerce that we might preserve our liberty. We flattered ourselves that when, by withdrawing our commercial intercourse with Britain, which had an undoubted right over to withdraw or continue, her trade should be diminished, her revenues impaired, and her manufacturers unemployed. Our ministerial foes would be induced by interest or compelled by necessity to depart from the plan of tyranny which had been so long pursued, and to substitute in its place a system more compatible with the freedom of America, the justice of Britain, that this scheme of non-importation and non-exportation might be productive of the desired effects. We were obliged to include the islands in it. From this necessity, and from this necessity alone, has our conduct towards them proceeded. By converting your sugar plantations into fields of grain, you can supply yourselves with the necessities of life. While the present unhappy struggle shall continue, we cannot do more. But why should we make an apology to the patriotic assembly of Jamaica, who know so well the value of liberty, who are so sensible of the extreme danger to which ours is exposed, and who foresee how certainly the destruction of ours must be followed by the destruction of their own? We received uncommon pleasure from observing the principles of our righteous opposition distinguished by our approbation. We feel the warmest gratitude for your pathetic mediation in our behalf with the Crown. It was indeed unavailing, but are you to blame? Mournful experience tells us that petitions are often rejected, while the sentiments and conduct of the petitioners entitle what they offer to a happier fate. That our petitions have been treated with disdain is now become the smallest part of our complaint. Ministerial insolence is lost in the ministerial barbarity. It has, by the exertion peculiarly ingenious, procured those very measures which is laid at us under the hard necessity of pursuing, to be stigmatized in Parliament as rebellious. It has employed additional fleets and armies for the infamous purpose of compelling us to abandon them. It has plunged us in all the horrors and calamities of civil war. It has caused the treasure of blood of the Britons, formerly shed and expanded for far other ends, to be spilt and wasted in the execrable design of spreading slavery over British America. It will not, however, accomplish its aim. In the worst of the contingencies, a choice will still be left, which it never can prevent us from making. The peculiar situation of your island forbids your assistance, but we have your good wishes. From the good wishes of friends of liberty and mankind, we shall always derive consolation.